Composers enable their audiences to recognize and appreciate the underlying paradoxes and inconsistencies evident within our human behavior by highlighting its complex nature through the representation of conflict within their texts. Arthur Miller's The Crucible explores the nuances of our behaviors through the representation of conflict occurring between individuals with opposing motivations. However, Josh Schwartz's Looking for Alaska instead focuses on the conflict of interest between opposing communities and illustrates the importance of true collectivism in a society. Miller and Schwartz innovatively utilize their textual forms to shape our understanding of the world by exposing the universally complex nature of human behavior and allowing us to apply their perspectives to our present lives as a contemporary audience. The paradox of social order and personal freedom becomes increasingly clear within the conflict that emerges between authority and the collective, revealing the contradictory and thus complex nature of our behaviors as guided by our inconsistent desires. Within their texts, the composers express how imperative it is we recognize that enforcing social order or individual freedom leads to the detriment of the other, emphasizing the diligence required in finding a balance between the two. Miller introduces the underlying conflict of Salem and allegorically applies it to the experiences of those during the 1950s affected by McCarthyism. Miller's authorial intrusion uniquely utilizes the play form as he provides his view in his own words, positioning audiences into recognizing the fundamental dichotomy of Salem and the contradictory nature of human behavior and existing in a society. The personification emphasizes Miller's own perspective of the grip that this paradox holds over human behavior and the extent to which he believes it will prevail as a timeless and universal aspect of the human condition. The quote reveals the complexity of human behavior by highlighting its paradoxical nature and wanting both freedom and order. Miller illustrates how the dissonance between community members causes tension within Salem, especially in a divided interpretation of right and wrong. This is demonstrated through dialogue, which represents the conflict evident between authority in Salem and those who dare to exercise individual freedom. Miller's use of metaphor paired with figurative language demonstrates the extreme abuse of power in the Salem society and the intolerance to opposing views, revealing to audiences the dangers behind a rigid adherence to binary collective. Miller exposes the fundamentalist ideology of Salem's theocracy, positioning his 50s audience to identify the dangers of fundamentalism as practiced by McCarthy. Through the representation of this conflict, Miller allows a deeper understanding of the complex nature of human behaviors, exposing a paradox within our collective structures even in today's context. Schwartz similarly exposes the paradox between order and freedom through his representation of the early 2000s setting in Looking for Alaska, an era in which teenagers were breaking down barriers and exercising their individual freedom in opposition to societal rules.
Remember, you are given a large measure of freedom here. Abuse it, and you will regret it.
The authoritative tone of the dialogue in this scene establishes the dominance in Mr. Stanza's character and reveals him as the antagonist, allowing audiences an insight into his bureaucratic role at Culver Creek High, the series' setting.